Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to those on the West Coast and beyond. It is Wednesday, August 17th, and welcome to our August Project Management Community Group meeting. And let me, just a few reminders for today as we work on Zoom is please make sure to mute your phone. Don't place us on hold or mute your audio. Don't place us on hold. We don't like to listen to hold music in the background. If you have a question, please use the chat during the session today. We will leave it to our guest speaker to decide whether she wants questions throughout her presentation or questions at the end. You can also raise your hand if you have a question, and we can allow you to open a mic up for that as well. But chat is preferred, and we'll have ad monitoring chat during the keynote portion of today's session. As I noted, we are recording today, and I am John Preddy from George Mason University. I'm going to be your primary host today. Lisa cannot be with us. Something about back to school and kids heading off to college in late August, I guess, as most of us are aware. And we'll have Ed do some intros as he has worked with our guest speaker, Juliet, today. So agenda for today, welcome logistics. We just finished that. We'll get you some updates for the PMCG. And get right into our keynote so we can focus as much time as possible there. And then we'll circle back for a wrap up and next steps going into next month. So a couple of updates from Educause. Some folks may have seen an email come out last week about the new Educause Connect tool. And we've talked about it a little bit here, which is Educause is rolling out a new community platform for our communication collaboration. And we've been asking for it for years. The PM community group has actually been very active and provided a report to Educause proper, probably about almost 3 years ago now, about web design, web development, how to approach it, how we can better interact beyond just listservs, more like threaded discussions, topical conversations, ways that we can store collateral in a little more consolidated fashion. So that is coming this fall. It is being rolled out in October officially. At the conference is when they plan on doing it. There's some early adoption that we will have access to as the PM community group. And we're supposed to get some training from us as leaders on September the 14th. So we'll know more about it then. The platform, I didn't want to put it in here, but it's called Higher Logic. If anybody is familiar with it, I myself haven't seen anything other than their website. But we will get more information on what they're doing at that point in time. Quick note for members of the community is if you do not have a Educause profile set up right now, you will need to have an Educause profile set up in order to access the new platform. So if you haven't, you can always take a look on Educause, log in and see. And if you can't log in, you know you don't have a profile. Update on our templates. I know we've been talking about this for a few months now. We actually have received over 20 templates to date. They are going up in the next few days on our new page on our Wiki site. They may be subject to move when we get the new platform, but we wanted to get things cleared out and out there. And Carol Kiliani has done a great job going through those templates and have them ready to drop into the page to get them uploaded. And I will actually see if I can flip over right now to show what our page looks like. So we have a project management template page right from the front page of our wiki. It says templates, templates, templates. When you click on that, and what we're doing is we've got them in topical groups, and we're just dropping the templates into our folders, and they will appear in these boxes. So our test one is out here from about a week or so ago when we were testing it. So we've got them all ready and named. We just have to drop them into the folders, and we will send it out to the group when they are all out here. So we encourage you, please do continue sharing your templates with us. We learn a lot from each other, and that's really the foundation of the group. Finally, we want to welcome our 2 new steering committee members. So we put a call out a couple months ago, and we had multiple volunteers, and we want to welcome Jennifer Smith from the New School and Earl Lewis from University of Utah, who both joined us for 3-year terms on the steering committee. We also want to thank Chris Harshman from AB Tech, who has had to roll off the committee based on work constraints and things going on. So, but we want to thank there. So Earl, if you want to say hello and And Jennifer, if you want to say hello, feel free to give a quick wave, but I know Jennifer is on vacation today, joining us.
Hello, everyone.
So you're gonna have to say something, Jennifer, so you can get the.
I just wanted to say, here's a quick wave. It's really great to be here, and I'm really excited to be able to contribute to this amazing group. I've gotten so much out of it, and I only hope that I can help contribute a small bit back to the community.
Thank you. And Earl?
Yeah, same. I've really appreciated everything that's transpired with the Educause PMCG time, and I look forward to making some sort of contribution. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. And then just to remind you, our other steering committee members are Jen Birch from the University of Michigan, Adam Petrie from Kansas State, Carol Kiliani from Cal State Office of the Chancellor, and our final one is Ed Puckett from University of Houston Clear Lake. And I'm actually going to use this as an opportunity to turn it over to Ed, who is going to lead us into our keynote today. So thank you, Ed.
Thank you, John, and good day, everyone. And I'd like to personally welcome Jennifer Smith and Earl Lewis. Thank you, guys. Glad to have you aboard. I'm going to jump into the introduction here. Our guest speaker today is Juliet Bastian. She's the CEO of Strategy Works Consulting. I came to know her because I was volunteered, as they say, to participate in a 5-day workshop at our university on strategic planning. And I would come to know that this was going to be a intentional, very purpose-driven experience. We've all been at organizations where you've got a strategic plan, and if this describes your organization, please don't raise your hand because this is not recorded and won't be on YouTube. But we've been in organizations where that strategic plan is put in a very nice looking binder, all shiny and blue or red or what have you, and it's put up on the shelf, and everyone looks up at it and says, "There's our strategic plan," and they think nice thoughts about it. But this is about making that actionable and how that impacts the project management area. And it's just exciting. Ever since I've gotten to know Juliet, it's just been awesome talking to her about strategic planning and making that purpose driven. So with no further ado, I hand this over to Juliet. Welcome.
Well, thank you. And I'm just sharing my slides, so I just want to make sure everyone can see the slides.
Yes.
Great. And then, yes, as I move through the presentation, thank you for the thumbs up. Please feel free if there's questions, I'm happy to take those. Ed and John, if you would help me if I don't see them as I move through, I'd be happy to, as I said, because sometimes if you see a slide or you hear a concept and you have a question and you wait, you might forget it or not come back to it. So I want to honor that and make sure that I get those right as they're top of mind for you. But it's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here. You know, as Ed said, I did do a training at the University of Houston Clear Lake, and I had some students there. And since then, Ed and I have developed this relationship, and it's great because when I get students that get it and they can really go past the concepts and learn to apply it and to kind of think, how does this apply to my organization? It's wonderful conversation. And that's what I love about getting to know Ed and to continue to know Ed. So when he asked me if I would mind doing this, I was happy to. So this is a little bit about me, a bigger picture of me if you can't see, but my mission really is to help individuals, businesses, and organizations get really clear about what it is they want and then create a plan so they can move from where they're at to where they want to be. That's really what strategy is all about. It's not to say that you're not doing good. It is to say that wherever you're at, want to make you and move you to a better space. So that's what I love about it. And I really do love working with higher education institutions and colleges, but I've worked with a number of different organizations. So a few fun little facts about me is that I call myself a fashion artist. And so I say that because I sew. My mother was a seamstress. She taught me to sew. And from a very, very early age, so it's like breathing to me. But I do more than just do that. I create in all of the visions and things that come with that. So I've done a number of designs for artists, red carpet events and special occasions. I also love to dance. And so I've listed there the genres that I typically stick with. I don't do partner dancing because it's tough enough for me to do my own steps without messing up. So I don't want to mess up anybody else. And the other thing is that I have had the pleasure of being the co-author of a best-selling book called The Game Changer, and there's several volumes. And so I was in last year's volume, which is volume 5. To get to my experience, just very, very quickly, 30 plus years, the years just roll by working in the space around strategy, change management, communication, organizational development with government, nonprofits, private sector organizations, both internationally and domestically. I am certified as a Balanced Scorecard Master Professional and Performance Indicators, certified public official, and I also have my degree from Cal State San Bernardino. So today, what I wanted to cover with you when Ed asked me to speak, he said, this came up because the question was, why is strategic planning important to project management teams or leaders in project management, and how can it help you and see the value of that? So we're going to talk about some of the challenges that you face, and I'd be happy for you to share, Annie. I have a few that I've listed, but if there's anything that you'd want to share, I'm happy to hear those as well. And then I'm going to move to the section that says, let's take a look at those challenges and let's see what part of the strategic planning process really helps solve those or move you past those challenges and obstacles and support you in doing what you do. And then lastly, I want to give you just a little six-step process. I call it a strategic plan blueprint that you should be able to take and just kind of move through that to really help you get to at least a skeleton or an outline of a decent strategic plan that's going to serve you. So some of the, just some statistics first. I looked up in the Gallup poll here, and you guys, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, very small percentage of companies successfully complete all of the projects that they have in place. And there's a number of reasons for doing that. Not that it's any fault of the project management, it's a structural or a process thing. And then a PMI research says that for every $1 billion that are invested in, this is in the United States, 122 million are wasted because of lack of project planning and performance. So there was some research, and I pulled this up from PMI, Gallup, Deloitte, Gartner, and Liquid Planner, that these were kind of the top challenges that you face as project managers. And that's goals are not clear. So, or inadequate communication, or expenses are not estimated right. So therefore it blows your budget. Risk management is not handled well, or there are some unrealistic deadlines. So when it comes to the goals being unclear, it's really setting clear expectations about what's the objective of the project, what are the milestones, how are we going to measure that? All of that helps you, right? The clearer you are on that, the better it is for you to go ahead and manage that project and move it to its fruition and to completion. Communication. What they found was where there were errors in communication, it was because it wasn't timely, whether that be project managers communicating the status of the project or players that feed into that project communicating, or vice versa. And there were lack of important items that needed to be reported on the status of the project. With respect to the expenses, a lot of times people in the organization will say, we need this done and we need it to be a project or IT or some support unit in the organization to handle this. We don't really know how much it's going to cost. We just know we need it done. And it goes back to communication and setting some goals. Once you have goals, you can then, it's easier to manage and set realistic expectations about how much this project is going to cost, or what are the expenses to the organization. And there are many organizations who I might suggest may not do that very well, so it doesn't serve them. When it comes to risk management, there are some that face the challenges of not having any strategies related to a project. Deadlines, and I think we all have this, so many priorities. And how do you say, what do I work on first? How do I manage this? How do I keep my eye on all of these balls that I have in the up in the air? So sometimes you may feel like this. You're juggling a lot of tasks. How do you figure out what to do when everything is on your to-do list? And how do you prioritize when there's so many things to prioritize? So with that, I wanted to talk about what are the benefits of strategic planning. So one of the first, and then I'll take that and share the benefits of strategic planning as an offset so that you can appreciate where that can help you with at least those top challenges. When it comes to the lack of clarity for the goals, it is strategic planning forces an organization, when done well, to say this isn't a true assessment of where we're at, and this is where we want to be. And we're going to not define the widgets that we're going to do. We're going to define the reason why and the milestones for an initiative to support that. It also gives everyone in the organization a clear sense of direction of where they're going. So what that does is when you know that everyone is going in the same direction and you have a few people that says, oh, well, you know what, I'm walking in the same direction to get here. However, there's an obstacle in my way. If I know I still want to get to this same end state, then I can think with my skill set and what I know about the best way to move around the obstacle that faces me and get to that final destination. And so that's where a great strategic plan is that's put in place is very helpful. And also in that, you want to make sure that you have clear, definable, measurable outcomes. And so that moves to inadequate communication. With strategy and strategic planning, it's not something that you want to do with just the people that are the executive level or the C-suite level. You want to make sure that everyone is involved in that process, and you communicate. Once you've gotten everybody involved in that strategy in place, you want to make sure that everybody knows what it is, what it means to them, what is the vision, where's the sense of direction, where are we going? And you do that by aligning people in the organization. And what we mean by that is that you then say at the C-suite level for the overall organization, this is what we want the strategy to look like. Now we're going to go to the support units or the business units, and we're going to talk to them and put the strategy in language that makes sense to them. And then we go down to the employees. So now you have everybody that says, I understand exactly how I'm going to help get to that vision. So it really, in the end, connects the dots between the vision of the organization and the day-to-day activities and the projects, obviously, that you manage, because it's very clear as to what it's supposed to look like, what the outcomes are. Once you have that clarity, it really makes it a whole lot easier for you to estimate how much is it going to cost, right? So you don't underestimate. You plan that project. As you guys know, the scope, the budget, and then the timeliness of everything is important. So all of that is defined in the strategy when done well, so that when that project is handed to you to manage, you've got the elements that you need. I know in working with Clear Lake, that is one thing that we were, and it's a new concept to many folks that work in strategy, is really being extremely clear. We're used to using a lot of words sometimes that are vague or they're industry specific without a lot of definition as to exactly what that's going to look like if we're successful in that area. So it also helps mitigate, or actually not mitigate, but help you define your expenses by prioritizing what initiatives or projects are we going to do first, because we only have a finite amount of resources. And then once we do that and we measure the success of that initiative, if it's successful and it moves our strategy where we want to go, then that's great. We have the data we need to go ahead and say, let's continue to do that. However, you can have a project that's extremely successful by every measure that you put in place, but it doesn't advance your strategy. And if that's the case, you have the data to say, you know what, let's not continue to spend money on this. Let's choose to put this aside. Know it's successful. However, let's select another initiative or project that's going to work for us. And with respect to risk management, yes, it's all about at the beginning. One of the things that we do is part of the SWOT analysis is looking at the threats that are there and the weaknesses that an organization has. And it's through that process that you're going to reveal some of the risks that you need to take a look at from a strategic standpoint. And then also, are there any projects and what the risks are around the completion of those projects. So, and the final one are the unrealistic deadlines. So again, with prioritizing the projects that the organization has agreed upon overall that they're going to do, and then taking into consideration the day-to-day activities that happen, how do we then say, look, we have to step back and say we only have a finite amount of resources, staff, time, and funding to do something. So what does it look like practically that we can take on and successfully complete, as opposed to trying to do everything just because it's been handed down or identified that it is something that is good. So I want to say here is that a strategy is not an annual thing. A strategic plan is over a period of, in the technology world, it's shorter, so about 3 years, but typically about 5 years. Some organizations tend to do 10 years. That doesn't seem to be the case so much anymore because things, as you know, change pretty quickly. So it is over a longer period of time. So if you have a set of projects, they all don't have to be done right out of the gate. You then strategically talk about what's going to have the best impact to really help the organization move forward. So with strategy, this is sometimes where a lot of organizations are at. They typically, everybody gets a kind of good idea. Yes, this is what the organization is about. This is where we want to go. This is what we want to do. And I got a good idea. I'm going to go ahead and take the initiative and do what I think is the best, take the best route. Well, you'll see there's a lavender arrow there. And I like to say in some organizations that I work for, that's where I was at. I just knew, I knew exactly what needed to be done. And I would communicate with and create projects about this is the way that it needs to be done because it's really going to move the organization forward. But I wasn't aligned with some of the other people in the organization. And so you want to move from this to a strategy saying everybody is really clear about the direction that you're going. And so with that clarity, you can make better decisions when put in front of them. And you can move forward faster by group effort than you can individually. So I want to also, I'd like to show this slide to talk about some terms around strategic planning and the distinction between the different types of strategic plans. There are people that will use the term strategic plans, but they really mean more of an operational or an annual plan. And those I have titled here traditional plans. And how you can tell they're traditional plans is because they tend to focus on outputs. What do I mean by an output versus an outcome? Well, if you have a company, and we'll just say it creates widgets, the creation of the widgets is an output. But there's a bigger reason why the company makes the widget. If it's a for-profit company, it's because they want to make money and attract customers. If it is a governmental entity or a nonprofit or an organization like higher education where you are there to pretty much serve a population, then it is about a higher purpose. Well, we create these courses, or we have this particular technology to support the student's success through their journey. The bigger picture is at the end of the day, it is because you have students that have enrolled and successfully moved through their educational journey and graduated or completed the coursework that they started off with as their vision of success. So the traditional plans focus on, well, how many classes did we create? How many people were enrolled? And many times, because it is like that, it doesn't have the focus that we would like it to have for an overall strategy. And you have a lot of what they will title in those plans as objectives. And typically it's an add-on to the work that is currently being done. So it can feel sometimes intrusive to the staff. Now, so that's more of an operational plan, not necessarily a strategic plan, but we do find, at least I do in my experience, organizations that will suggest that their traditional plans are strategic plans. Strategic plans, more traditional ones, happen to be focused on outcomes. So if we go to the example that I just shared, it's the difference between an output, which are the number of classes or the number of students that are enrolled, to the bigger picture. We want to make sure that we provide quality education or that we have student success. It's more focused, and then you have fewer objectives because they are broader and they cover a longer period of time. And what you do when they're done well is you make sure that they are aligned with the current workload. And if they are not, then you would adjust your workload so that it is aligned. Now, strategic plans, there's the VW version, and then there's the Lamborghini version. And so the Lamborghini version sometimes is called, or in most instances, it's called a balanced scorecard. Now, some people will use the term balanced scorecard to mean metrics. Right now, in this point in time, it's interchangeable. Sometimes they'll do that to say, well, I have a scorecard measuring what's going on. When I talk about it and when we use it for strategic plans, it means that when you build your strategy, you are not just building a strategy with just how much money are we going to bring in or how do we serve our customers. You recognize that there are two other levels that you have to consider to drive those outcomes, because those are outcomes. So when you look at this slide, it is saying, asking the question, as we build our strategy, do we have an objective or something in our strategy that addresses what is it that we need from a capacity standpoint for our organization in order to achieve this vision that we've defined? And if we have that, then how do we do things and how do we use what we have to its fullest capacity? Those are objectives that you'll see as part of your strategy on what we call the process perspective. And then finances. Now, this particular order of things suggests that it is for a nonprofit or higher education, where the customers and the value that they see in coming to you is at the very top. And so you want to show in your strategy, well, what is the value that we provide to them? And then that second one, the finance, is going to be how well do we use the finances that we have to do what we need to do. So when you make sure that you consider these vantage points or these perspectives when you're building your strategy, it is a stronger strategic plan at the end because you know you've given that the consideration. I've seen a lot of strategic plans that don't look at it from that, and what I find is sometimes there's a gap, and it's easy to do when you don't ask these questions and look at it from these vantage points really around the process or the capacity. They're gung-ho, we're going to do all of this for the students or the organization or the university, and we're going to make this, but they don't give it consideration or include in their strategy how that's going to happen or what they need to make that happen. So you want to think about your strategy as being part of a system, and your strategic plan is part of that system, as well as communication. And you remember, one of the challenges is communication or miscommunication. Change management is also important to do, and a lot of times change management and communication go hand in hand, because doing strategy is a change in thinking for a lot of people in the organization. And then alignment is the other piece of this system, is making sure that once you have your plan, you communicate it, you look at what are going to be the expectations and some of the objectives that we're going to face in implementing this. And then you start saying, let's do some work on making sure that everybody is clear on what the strategy is about. And they're also equally as clear as to how they are going to contribute to that. So strategic planning, the definition is about the process of defining your strategy, or the direction that you want to go. And then once you've done that, creating some very clear outcomes so that you can turn around and collect data on that, make some decisions, and then allocate your resources accordingly so that you can move forward. So this is the blueprint that I told you that I would share with you. And so there are 6 steps to it. The next slides, these are the last slides that I'll be covering in the presentation, but these next slides will talk about each one of these. But it's really starting with assessing where you're at, developing your strategy, putting some measures in place. Now, I want to make a clear distinction. These are adding measures to your strategy. You will have a separate set of measures for your initiatives. Ed, is your hand up question?
Yes, I accidentally hit the clapping, although the clapping still applied because you're doing a great job. But
Thank you.
we've got a couple of questions, and I thought this would be a good time to touch on those.
Yes, that's
Before we
great.
dive into the process. So
Sure.
a question from one of our listeners said, asked in this way: it seems higher ed has a challenge with strategy development. Would you say that's accurate to that's specific to higher ed, or do you see that as applying to both higher ed and what we call the corporate world?
So that's a great question. And my experience, I spent 25 years at the county in Southern California. And what I found is that it's not just higher education. It is those organizations that are typically governmental or nonprofit or funded in some way, and they're bigger organizations, because they typically have not embraced what would be practices that work for businesses. You see, strategy was developed for for-profit businesses because they said we need a plan, and the original strategic plans weren't around the balanced approach. They were around, we need a strategy so that we can make more money, and we know we need customers, and that's what the focus was. And then it evolved. And so then as the evolution came into place, we find, and I found this to be the case, more governmental entities, more higher education, those entities that had traditionally not entertained concepts or methods or processes that worked in the private sector, they're now entertaining that because we have people that have been able to say, let's apply those and see what it looks like in our world.
Okay. And then another comment that I could turn into a question, value to customer, that part seems challenging for some to identify in higher ed. So I think the point they're trying to tease out there, it would be hard for higher ed to drive out the value to the customer.
So when it comes to the customer value proposition, or student value proposition, and you want to think about this, every organization for the most part has a couple of different, or can potentially have a couple of different customers that they serve. So for higher ed, your first and foremost are going to be your students, but you will also have customers who might be the parents, particularly if they're younger students. So what you want to do there is you want to think from their eyes. And a lot of times that information is gathered through surveys, asking them, talking to them, finding out what they like, what they don't like. I know if you guys are in project management or if you're IT, is your strength, you're constantly thinking about, if I'm developing this app or access to something using technology, is it user friendly? So it's the same kind of concept, if that helps explain it a little bit. But yes, it can be a challenge to do that because it's a little bit different way of thinking about getting at that. And so you do have to really think about just the different aspects. And I always say, always think about it. If you were in their shoes, what is it that they say they like? Why is it they would come? What are the attributes? And that's why I really enjoy, really in this day and age with COVID, what I found is my higher educational clients are now faced with a little bit more of a challenge when it comes to enrolling students, because before COVID, one of the things that students would come and choose and select a higher education institution was the aesthetics of the location.
Yes.
That's been taken away. So yeah, so it's a kind of different thing of thinking.
Yeah, and so your comment on customers has now got that chat just scrolling up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is it a
let me-
good
so
thing?
you've touched on a point that they're interested in. So I'll highlight some of these. Someone says researchers are also customers.
Yes,
Yeah, and someone says yes, what that person said. Someone almost exasperation says so many customers, and then patients for those that have higher ed institutions that are also hospitals
yes,
would be customers.
yes.
The public for those that come to the library. So you can kind of see people are starting to stretch out and think and extend to all these groups that are their customers. Is there, I'll bundle this and say, is there, would it be appropriate to say, okay, yeah, these are our customers, but isn't there a level of customers like a primary versus a secondary? Because otherwise, if you start looking at it, then everyone's your customer.
There are thank you, Ed. There are. And so remember, I talked about the alignment and at the different levels. So when you look at the entire organization, what you'll do, and when I work with organizations, is let's just put the whole laundry list of who you serve. And then we talk about what are the things that you provide in terms of tangible things that you provide to them. So for researchers, right, they are your customers. They want to get information. They want data. They want reports. For alumni who can be your customers too, there are certain things they want. The students, there are certain things they want. You want to lay that out. Sometimes you'll see some broader similarities across that, and you can group that at that level. Then when you dig deeper, there's a couple of different nuances, because when you dig to the business units, so as an example, the IT unit has different customers. They're going to have other business units as their customers, as will other support units. So they're going to define, well, how we contribute to the overall success of fulfilling the highest customer, who are the ones, the primary ones are the ones that directly benefit from you. And then there's ones that are a little bit farther removed. So you want to think, if you have a bullseye, right in the center of every higher education is going to be your students. Now you can break that population down and say, well, I have, lifelong learners, continuing ed students. I have students that are fresh from high school. I have students that are kind of in between, exchange international students. You can have those different populations, but then the way that we do for strategy, because see, strategy is your broader, right? Your outcome, what's the higher thought that you have? Say, let's just say we have a student population, and these are the reasons that they tell us they come to us. Then you break that down to the next level or farther out from your bullseye, which might be even your vendors, their stakeholders, anybody, people in the community. They don't directly benefit, they indirectly benefit. So to an extent, you consider them, but you don't necessarily build your strategy around them. And I've done this enough to see, because with every organization, I've had, particularly with governmental entities, they said, everybody is our customer. We serve everybody. And so time and time again, I said, let's just put them on Post-it notes and see who you serve. And when they do that, and I do a process called a customer value proposition, we find there's a lot of similarities. So we can combine it and say, for these groups, this is how we serve them. And then when you get to the more tactical, your outcome, then you can break it down and say, okay, for these groups, this is the project or the initiative or the way we're going to serve this group, because we find they need more support. So it's really kind of a hierarchy. I hope that helps.
That does. And you even got Jen Birch was clapping for that answer, I think.
Yeah.
Right,
And
so.
I can go on forever, but I know I have a limited time, but that's a big key. Once you get that, that is so much more clear for you.
So I think we got one more question that I did skip over, then we'll let you get back to the process. So
Sure.
That one question was, let me scroll up. How often do you do planning? For instance, we have a 10-year plan, too broad in general, 6-year goals, annual presidential goals, departmental plans in our case. We never know to what we are accountable.
Exactly. So I would say 10 years is long. However, I've worked with organizations who have 10 years and then they say, well, you know what, we want to break that down into maybe 2 5-year strategic plans. I say this, you do the more robust planning of your strategy let's just say it's 5 years, every 5 years. but every year you review that. And that's that last step, which is evaluation, where you do a quick review saying, we've been collecting data over the years. Is it telling us what we need? Do we need to adjust our strategy? So for many, Clear Lake is a great example, Ed, right? You guys rolled out your strategic plan in March of 2020, literally about 2 weeks before COVID hit.
Yes.
And I remember, so you had your broader picture. We didn't go back and reinvent your strategy for your 5-year plan. What we did was adjust, and we're looking at that now, the initiatives and the projects that you're going to have to put in place. So at the end of the year, it was the evaluation of what came up where we need to adjust our strategy and our objectives. And so that's how you manage it. And that's where when you build it's like building a house. When the foundation is solid and you need to repaint a wall here or move something here, you can do that without reinventing the wheel or refurbishing everything. So 5 years, I say, is a good one. I have worked with organizations that have the 10 years and then they break that into two 5-year cycles. And then if you have the other ones where, and I know what you're talking about, if you're part of a system, then the system might have their goals and their visions and the direction. We always try to align it if you're part of a system so that you're not misaligned and you can integrate that into what your strategy is. Similarly, if there's an organization that comes to me and they say, you know what, I'm the IT department. The university doesn't have one, and I don't know that they're going to get one, but I like this concept. I want a strategy. We can do that. We always just take a look at what the vision is of the organization and the mission, and we align it with that. So with the other more detailed and more frequent, I'd look at those as, remember the slide that I said are traditional plans? They're more your operational plans. So you want to do what you can to align that, but to do it in such a way that you're not always every few months, you're really looking at, let's do some metrics, let's look at this plan, because that's all you're doing is planning and you're not moving forward.
Yeah. All right, so I hope we haven't hindered your ability to go through process. We're about 1:43 Central Time, so let's talk about this next section of your presentation.
Sounds good. So the 6 steps: assessment, developing the strategy, measures, and these are strategic measures, and then strategic initiatives, and then the alignment throughout the organization and evaluation. So let's look at the first one. When we talk about assessment, most of you guys typically know this, you hear it all the time. We're going to do a SWOT analysis. We're going to look at the strengths, weaknesses, the opportunities and threats. That's where you're going to look at what challenges or risks we need to take a look at, where we're not so great, where can we work on, and where we're strong, or opportunities that present themselves, where do we build on it? You'll pull in any market research you have, any surveys, any other reports. That's all a part of this. This is where you define who your customers are, what it is they need. Doesn't mean you're going to give them everything they need, and then what value they see in you. And we spend quite a bit of time on this one because this is really the foundational piece, and you want to make sure you get this right before you move on. And so what I like to say about this one is, I know that when I went through many years of strategic planning, I was like, oh my gosh, you know, how do I do this? How do I do this? I got all these reports. I don't know what to do with this. Oh, okay, I'll just guess. I teach you a way to synthesize all of this information and just really pull out the key things. And we look at that and we say, what of these reports do I say is important for me to put into our strategy and pay attention to? And then we move into the development of the strategy. So once you look at all of this information, you say, we've just pulled right now this concept or this thought or something that came up that we need to know is important. We put that there. And I promise you, if you look at those different things, you'll see some themes or some areas that you're saying, you know what? If I group these concepts or these things that I've listed together, it indicates to me that for us operations, we need to really beef that up. Or maybe we need to beef up an area that we have to excel in that are partnerships, right? And so you develop these focus areas and then you break those down into objectives. Objectives are like the bridge. They are the bridge between the vision and the mission and the 3 or 4 areas that you say we have to absolutely excel in order to get to our vision. Then there's that bridge that says, okay, over a 3 or 5 year period of time, what are the things that we're going to continuously work on, like improve communication? And then you cross that bridge to what's the specific activity that is going to, that has a beginning and an end, that's going to drive the improvement in communication. And then the other part of this is, which is a nice add to any strategy, is a visual depiction of the strategy on a strategy map. And then, as I said earlier, you want to then, once you've defined what are the outcomes of these objectives, what do I want to see happen as a result of an improvement in communication? How will I know? How will I measure it? How will that help me define what projects that I'm going to work on and prioritize? So you develop a set of measures based on that. You measure your progress toward those intended outcomes. I suggest that you come up with measures that are monthly, quarterly, or biannually. Steer away from annual, because your measures and that data is meant to give you information to make decisions about what to do and sometimes what not to do. That moves us into the doing, which are the initiatives or the projects. So you can tell the distinction between the initiatives because they have a beginning and an end versus something that you're continually working on, which is part of a longer term strategy. And you guys love this, manage them like projects. I tell my clients all the time, manage them like projects, scope, budget, time, so that you make sure that you've got those expenses aligned in place, you stay within the scope, there's not scope creep, and you get them done in the time. And if you don't, the measures are going to tell you why, and you can adjust accordingly. Then when we come to the alignment, that's where we really work at integrating this strategy, the organizational wide one, to the different departments or business units or colleges. And we say, okay, in your terms, how can you improve communication? And so then they articulate that in their strategy, but it's still aligned to the overall strategy. It's just their part of contributing to it. And so you create those strategic plans at that level, and then ultimately you take it down and align it with the evaluations for the task or job assignments for the employees. So the employees now have a personal objective that is aligned with the strategy, and they know how they fit in. And then finally, you have an evaluation. So I say you're collecting metrics. At least once a month, look at that, see what that data is telling you. Quarterly, you have strategic planning meetings where you're saying, okay, let's sit down and look at all of our objectives. What are the strategic measures telling us? Are our initiatives moving us in the direction we thought that they would? Do we need to tweak? And then annually, you've been talking about it. So as Ed said at the beginning, it's not sitting on a shelf. It is a part of everything that you do. You can then say, you know what, it's been a year, we've seen a trend one way or the other, we can keep going and that's great, or we can change it at this point. And then the annual reviews, and then as I said, your initiatives are what drive your strategy, your actions that you do. So you guys are very, very important in the chain of things and managing those projects, because they literally drive the success of the organization that has a strategy. So that concludes my presentation. There's so much I know to unpack in that, but hopefully that was helpful to you. I think from the chat, I spurred a few thoughts, which I love. So if there's any other questions, I'm happy to entertain that at this point.
There's one more question that came up. Any suggested methods to mend the gap between the university strategy and IT strategy?
So what you would do is you would take a look at the university strategy, and then in the way that we do it is we say, okay, what is the strategy? And from an IT perspective, first and foremost, how can we support what's on the university strategy? you have to understand you cannot support everything that's in their strategy because you're not the university. You are a piece of it. And then what you do is you add on to that anything that is unique to you, but is important that you do for your success as an IT unit that will then be successful, that then drives strategy. So a strategic plan at a business unit level contains the alignment with what they can do to support the university or the college's strategy, and then it's coupled with what they do that's unique. Why was that support unit created? Well, it was created because we needed technology, we needed support. These are the things that we do. Here's part of our strategy for us to help support overall, and that's going to be unique. It won't show up at the higher level, but it needs to show up at the support unit. So now you have more buy-in from the folks that are actually doing that.
And you're getting some good questions here too. And here, this one, I was waiting for this question to pop up because this was what launched us reaching out to you.
Okay.
So here it is. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. What do you do when there's no university strategy or outdated strategy?
You strongly suggest that they work on getting a short answer. There's a couple ways to approach it, and you just need to really, as they say, read the room, right? So there are some, if you don't have a university or a college strategy, you can still create one for your unit. And you just, in a couple ways I've done it, it just depends on the situation. But there's usually, they might not have a full strategic plan or balanced scorecard, but there's usually a vision and a mission. So just make sure you align with that and you say, okay, based on our understanding of the vision and the mission, this is how we're developing our strategy for what we want to do, is one approach. But that is if you absolutely know that you won't get buy-in for them to do that. If you think that you will get, and then the way you can litmus test that is, if you don't think you're going to get buy-in, but you want to create one, you can certainly share it with them after you create it, and you can structure it this way. Is, you know what, we have a vision and a mission, and what we wanted to do is create a more structured approach and a strategy for how we're going to support that. This is what we came up with. How do you feel about that? Do you think that there's something we're missing? Then that kind of fosters a conversation and a dialogue that can maybe help you. If there's something that they were thinking that you didn't, you can pick up on that. The other way to do that is, if they are open to that, really strongly suggest that they work on developing a strategy and just talk about the importance of really having clarity and having that communication. I found in all of my engagements, there's usually one person, at least one, that will come up and say, you know what, this is the first time that I've had a chance to sit in a room at the same time and talk about the overall strategy with someone who's not in my unit, or someone who I never interact with, maybe, a couple of times on something here and there, but it's great to hear what they do in their perspective. Now I get why they might have been pushing back at that, or why they might be a raving fan of something else. So those are just the two approaches, but of course, I'm biased. I would say I would strongly suggest, to the extent that you can, really do try to get that in place.
And we have time for two more questions as we're wrapping up to the top of the hour here. So let's see here. Any suggestions on prioritizing initiatives or reconciling between powerful stakeholders with divergent opinions on the most valuable strategic items?
Politics. So
Yes.
let's just call it what it is. That can be challenging. So a couple of approaches. In a perfect world, what you want to do is get all of the people, or you get the people that have an interest in it, and we prioritize by listing all of the initiatives that support the strategy, and use some criterion. So the criterion that typically we use are the number of objectives in your strategy, or the strategic impact that it will have, that doing this project or initiative, if you do that, it's going to actually address a majority of the strategy that you have in place to move you forward. The other thing is the funding or the budget. So I typically will just kind of, and this is just to really get a short list. is to say, okay, well, from a range of, it's not going to cost that much. So we kind of call those low hanging fruit to have a higher Likert scale number ranking to it's going to cost a lot. It's a big project. Thinking about that. And then also the timing sometimes. So when you look at those elements, you want to say, oh, you know, there's an organization that I work with. They were rolling out, it was an insurance company. They were rolling out a new technology platform. That was expensive. It was going to go over several years, but it was important to be in their part of their initiatives, but they just broke it down each year what they were going to tackle. And then they added in some small low-hanging fruit initiatives. It didn't cost that much. We're going to take a shorter period of time to accomplish so they can celebrate success and say we're moving forward. So it's a combination of all of those, but that would be it. Using the budget, how many strategic objectives are the impact on the strategy and the time.
Final question. Who ideally participates in the strategic planning? How many and at what levels?
So what works well is the team approach. And I use teams. So there'll be a strategic leadership team, which will be your leaders of your organization. So in a university or a college, it'll be the president, the vice president. If it's a university, it'll be the deans, and kind of the leadership team. So we always have a conversation about that, but just kind of generally, that's the strategic leadership team, because they're the ones that ultimately will say, we agree on the vision of where we're going to be 3 or 5 years out, and we, you know, agree this is the mission. Now, it doesn't mean they don't get input, they do, but they're the ones that they meet 3 times in a process. So the first time they meet, they take a look and they do that assessment, and then they come up with the focus areas. And then we use a temporary team called focus areas or theme teams. And those teams then, let's say you have a focus area and you say we have to, our focus is we have to just do so much better with partnerships because we have to increase enrollments, and that's a big piece of it. So we're going to put as a focus area an improvement in our partnerships and our collaborations. So what you'll do is you'll dig deeper into the organization and you'll pull people who are subject matter experts in that. So you might have a business community person or somebody from an alumni association. You'll pull those people in and you'll have them help identify, these are the things you need to really focus on to excel. And so they'll come up with that, and then they'll package that, give that back to the leadership team who looks at that, and they'll say, okay, wow, we've got all of these objectives. Now let's see some similarities and let's pull it together. And then the final team would be the objective owner teams and the ones that do the project management, but you're always going deeper in the organization.
All righty. Well, thank you, Juliet, so much.
Thank you.
John's taken over, so that's our cue that we need.
It is.
Here. And I'll give the floor back to John. Thanks so much.
That was our cue. Thank you, Ed. Juliet, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time, putting something together especially for us and sharing your insight. So we will go ahead, and when we have this saved, we'll share it with the rest of our community and we'll get you the copy of it as well. We just want to make a quick plug for our upcoming meetings in September. We actually have 2 meetings in September. We'll have our regularly scheduled meeting on the 15th, where we will provide some updated information on the conference, and hopefully we'll have more on the Educause Connect platform at that time. We're working on deciding whether we want to do a keynote or just focus on the conference activities. And then we have our second meeting in September on the 29th, where we will have a presentation on Notre Dame's decision guide. So it's a good kind of follow on to this, you know, as they look and see how they're going to, and how they use their tools to decide on what work to take on and what to do. October, we've got our the conference, and we haven't decided whether we're going to take the month off from our webinars or not, or relate something into the online conference format. And we'll be back in November and December. So that is what we have coming up. Again, just to recap, once I get the slide advance, we will see you all hopefully on September 15th at 1 p.m. That's our Wednesday at 1 meeting. So thank you again, everybody, for attending today. Thank you, Juliet, for taking the time to share with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.